London is hosting an international conference to help Ukraine recover from the conflict. The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is expected to unveil a financial assistance package, including a $3 billion credit from the World Bank. And currently, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is speaking at that conference. Let's listen in.
Adopting these and other critical reforms to increase Ukraine's transparency and competitiveness, to bolster the rule of law, will help attract more private investment. And that is essential. And you heard it from my colleagues. Governments are doing a lot. International financial institutions are doing a lot. Both of us have a hugely important role to play in Ukraine's recovery. But it is not enough. Only the private sector can mobilize the level of investment necessary to meet the country's massive needs. The diverse participation of the private sector here today in this conference shows the growth opportunity that global firms and investors see in the future of Ukraine, in the future of its people. But make no mistake, all of these reforms and recovery efforts depend on Ukraine having the capacity to deter and defend against future attacks by Russia. That's why, even as we invest in Ukraine's immediate and long-term recovery, we also have to build a Ukrainian military that is strong enough to protect Ukraine's sovereignty, its territorial integrity, and its independence. Not just to defend Ukraine's land, but to defend all that Ukrainians are building and will build on that land. It's also why the United States is committed to working to build support for a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, the core elements of which I outlined a couple of weeks ago in Helsinki. Those include a peace that upholds the United Nations Charter and its fundamental principles: sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence, that addresses both accountability and reconciliation, that ensures Ukraine's full participation and assent, and that supports Ukraine's reconstruction and recovery. Even as we rally around Ukraine's recovery, we must not lose sight of why that is necessary in the first place. Indeed, even as we come together here in London, committed to supporting Ukraine's buildup, Russia continues to try to burn it down. So, let's be clear. Russia is causing Ukraine's destruction, and Russia will eventually bear the cost of Ukraine's reconstruction. Until that time, we will continue to stand with the people of Ukraine as they make the greatest sacrifices to defend, to rebuild, to reimagine their country. And in doing so, we will reaffirm the principle at the heart of the international order, that people in every nation can write their own future, free from aggression, free from coercion, free from intimidation. That is a recovery well worth our robust and enduring support. Thank you very much.
The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was just addressing a conference taking place right now in London, and we had heard from the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak earlier on, and he's expected to be unveiling a financial assistance package, including a $3 billion credit from the World Bank for Ukraine. So that conference still underway, but let's bring in our correspondent Nadim Baba, who's standing by for us outside the venue in London to tell us what we've heard so far from the delegates, Nadim, and who's in attendance?
Well, Doreen, obviously those words from Secretary of State Blinken raising some of the crucial themes over this two-day conference. He said that clearly in his eyes and his allies, his partners' eyes, Russia will have to bear the cost of reconstructing Ukraine's economy. But in the short term, obviously, what he's saying is that the private sector will have to play the major role in stepping in promising to invest in Ukrainian companies and the like. So this is a diplomatic event. It's also a business event. Rishi Sunak, earlier on, the Prime Minister of the UK, before he introduced President Zelensky via video conference, Prime Minister Sunak reminded people of the advances that Ukraine had been making in sectors like green energy, but then reminding people of the devastating effects on the economy of 16 months of war, GDP down by almost 30%. So there are people here who are experts in fields such as green energy. There are CEOs of major international companies. Of course, there are the politicians. Secretary of State Blinken will be meeting his UK, German and French counterparts as part of the Quad to discuss things like how to use Russian assets legally. But behind the scenes, it's all about pledging the money, and particularly from those private companies. That's what Ukraine wants to hear right now.
Right. So how much is being promised overall?
Well, there are huge figures involved. Let's just look at the short term. The World Bank is saying that the reconstruction effort will need at least $14 billion. Beyond that, the Ukrainian government, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, who's speaking here shortly, estimates that the reconstruction will need at least $750 billion US. A recent study involving the UN and the EU and other institutions put it lower at around $440 billion US. Staggering figures nonetheless. On top of that, of course, many countries are pledging military support to Ukraine, and the total investment will therefore depend on how long the fighting continues. That's the background to all of this, and that's what nobody can really answer for sure. So the promises that Russia will pay, well, they're hard to back up right now. But there are efforts underway to try to get to use frozen assets and the like, alongside the involvement of the private sector here.
OK, thank you so much, Nadeem, for that update from London. So while that conference gets underway in the UK, there's been a drone strike on a building in Russian-controlled Donetsk, and we have our Ali Hashem, who's joining us live from there. So, Ali, is this the first time we see this kind of attack on Russian-controlled Donetsk?
Well, this is the first time a drone attack targets a place here in Donetsk, in the city of Donetsk. This is a building. We're standing in front of it. You can see the scene here. Maybe our cameraman could show us the building also. Just after midnight, a drone struck this building, the 20th floor, and it was completely burnt out, but there are no casualties, as we understood. Now, during the past days, there were shelling around this area. This is the center of the city of Donetsk. There are shellings. Artillery is being used in shelling the city. But this is the first time a drone targets a certain place in the city. And to many over here, this is a kind of an escalation. Well, when it comes in parallel with other attacks in Moscow, as we heard today, and also in Crimea, there is a context for it. I would like to show you the parts of this drone that hit the building here. This is a handmade drone, as we understood. This is the motherboard, and these are some partitions. There were kind of bullets inside it. However, as we said, there are no casualties reported. Now, during yesterday, for example, there were several attacks, artillery attacks, inside the city in Donetsk, for example, in the neighborhood of Kyivskaya and other neighborhoods, where one person was killed, and there were several reported injured. So this is the situation here now.
OK, thank you so much. Ali Hashem reporting for us from Donetsk.